Hello everyone, once again. If I could have your attention, please, it would be much appreciated. Honorable Dr. De Bernardi, ladies, gentlemen, and young change makers. My name is Stevie Tsanka, and it is my utmost pleasure to welcome you to Coffee Talk 2.0, United Nations 75 Youth Education. This is the latest of the Coffee Talk series our organization, United Nations Youth Association of Albania, has been organizing during these past months. And thank you very much for joining us, and we hope that it is going to be a very enriching experience for all of you. We also want to send a heartfelt thanks to all of our audience for following our live stream from our social media accounts, and we encourage them to actively engage in the discussion. Most importantly, we'd like to give the warmest of welcomes to Dr. Roberto De Bernardi, and I promise this is the last time I call you doctor, the representative of UNICEF in Albania, who graced our event with his presence tonight. You might have heard that this year is a special one for the United Nations. This year marks the 75th anniversary of the founding of this organization. The dynamics of the problem that the UN has had to deal with have changed dramatically during the past 75 years. However, there has been one issue that has always been of top priority for the United Nations, and that is youth education. Even though tremendous success has indeed been achieved, there's still a massive amount of work to be done. An estimated 600 million children and adolescents around the world are unable to reach minimum proficiency levels in reading and mathematics, even though 2/3 of them are already enrolled in schools. Not only that, roughly 1 in 5 school-age children are not in school at all. Add COVID-19 to the pandemic, to the equation, which impacted more than 90% of the students worldwide, and you get one of the biggest challenges that humanity is currently facing. However, it is during these times of adversity when the good within us is really revealed. So now I'd like to give the floor to Dr. De Bernardi to talk more about the UNICEF Education Strategy 2019-2030. Mr. De Bernardi, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Well, perhaps just a few words to better introduce myself. As you said, my name is Roberto De Bernardi. I'm a medical doctor by training. I'm Italian, although I have spent, I would say, 99.9%, if not 100% of my professional life abroad. Most of this life has been spent in Africa, in several African countries, working for just few years as a physician in a rural hospital, literally in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of elephants, lions, literally like that, like in the movies. And then I joined UNICEF and I started working on various issues, public health mainly, but not only, also issues like education, child protection, and fundraising, and many others. Before coming to Albania some 2 years ago, I was representative in Colombia, so in Latin America. And so I have had, I would say, a relatively good exposure as far as UNICEF at least is concerned, and also education programs in many different settings in many different countries and different cultures, etc. I have been working in, let's say, Islamic countries, like, for instance, Sudan and Somalia as well, if we can call them Islamic countries, of course. I have been working in European countries like Albania, in Latin America, and as I said, in many African countries, colonized actually by many different European countries, by Belgium, by the UK, by France, by Italy, Somalia, as I said, by Portugal, like Angola, Mozambique, and Sao Tome and Principe. So I have been able, let's say, to be exposed from the UNICEF side, at least, to different realities. So I'm gonna say a few words about this learning crisis, this expression that has been used in the UNICEF strategy. I don't know whether it really applies to Albania or not, and I would like to be able, let's say, to strike a balance between talking about education, let's say, in a way that may be too general, and at the same time, because it's necessary, of course, to look at the big picture, and at the same time also from time to time making reference specifically to Albania. So the first thing that one may say is, well, this expression learning crisis, does it apply to Albania as well or not? Well, if we look at some indicators, I cannot say that it applies to Albania. If we think about, Stevie talked about hundreds of millions of children who are already out of school, or at least of dropping out of school. Well, in the case of Albania, if we look at the number, pretty much every single child, with some few exceptions, of course, and one of the UN kind of, I don't want to call it slogans, but sort of buzzwords, buzz expressions, is leave no one behind. So no one has to be left behind. So even if there are just few, the ones who are not enrolled, at least in primary school, we should not forget about them. But as I was saying before, the vast majority of Albanian children nowadays at least start primary school. And that is not the case in many other countries, of course. Also, if we look at, for instance, the results of the very recent, 1 year ago, demographic and health survey, there is something about education, and we read that more than 20% of Albanians actually have a university degree. This means that actually Albania is doing better than European Union countries like Portugal, Italy, Austria, and is more or less at the same level as France and Germany, for instance. So one may say, well, there is no learning crisis in Albania. Well, in reality, there may be. I mean, there is and there isn't, because the numbers are there, of course, and they are not fake. However, sometimes numbers do not tell us all the truth. For instance, well, it is true that basically all the Albanian children get into school, get into primary school. However, if we talk about quality, even the ones who manage to complete the cycle, at least until before reaching the university, so getting a high school degrees, well, the quality of their learning is, I would say, significantly lower than the average learning than a child in a European Union country, or even in a Western Balkan countries, so the sub-region that Albania is part of, since the country is not yet officially part of the European Union. So these Albanian children learn less, unfortunately. And this has been proven every single year by these so-called PISA tests, sort of standardized tests that look at reading, comprehension, writing, math, of course, and the conclusion basically is that out of those 13 years that an Albanian child who manages to complete high school spends in school, only 9 of these 13 years are actually years during which the child learns. So there is a significant gap between the time that the child spends in school and the time that is actually useful for actual learning. Of course, this also happens in the other countries. It's not only in Albania that the time spent in school does not match 100% the time of learning, let's say, but the gap is much wider in Albania than in other European countries. Of course, it is also true that I was mentioning the PISA test before. It is true that although the results show that there is still a significant gap between the European Union countries, the average, and Albania, or even the Western Balkan countries and Albania, it is also true that the country recently has had some, I would say, minimal, but at the same time significant and regular improvement in terms of these PISA test results. And this, of course, must be acknowledged. Of course, education in general terms, I would say, has 2 main objectives. One is more, I would say, general and vague, but it is as important as the other one. So one to me is making all of us a better person. I mean, a lot of people used to say that if there is one thing that people cannot take away from you, is really education, is really what you have learned. Someone else used to say, for instance, that education may be expensive, it is true, But if you want to try something else, try ignorance if you think that education is expensive. So yes, it is expensive, but it is expensive because it is something that really remains with you. It is something that, as I was saying before, makes you a better person. And then, of course, the other objective of education, we have to be frank with ourselves, is to make all of us more competitive in the labor market, to give us the possibility of developing ourselves, not only, I would say, morally, because that is extremely important to me, but also, I would say, financially, economically. There's nothing wrong with it, as long as it is done honestly, of course, as I'm sure we are all doing it. Now, unfortunately, Albania, again, if we compare Albania with the other countries in the Western Balkans regions, and not even to mention the European Union countries, has the highest percentage of the so-called NEET. So, I mean, I'm sure you have already heard this expression, this acronym rather than expression. So, young people basically who are not in employment, who are not in training, are not in education, and they are somehow in a limbo. Well, of course, a lot of people say yes, but these statistics may be influenced by the fact that Albania is a country where the informal economy is quite strong, and therefore a significant number of those people may actually be employed informally. It basically doesn't get included into the official statistics. That may be true, but it has other implications. And now basically we are getting a bit too far perhaps from the topic of education. Now, of course, let me add one more element, and then I stop, and I think we can open for discussion. But anyway, Stevie will moderate the session, I'm sure. The other element that, of course, made the crisis or potential crisis, not just in Albania, of course, much more acute, is the COVID-19 situation. This is basically the first time in the whole history of the whole world, first of all, that there is one single, let's say, condition that has affected every single country in the world, because it is true. We had, for instance, what we call the World War I and World War II, and you and Albanians and me as Italian, we know well the history of World War I and World War II, but yes, they were world war in the sense that a lot of countries were involved. But even in Europe, that was the main theater, I would say, of both World War I and World War II, there were many countries that were not part of World War I or World War II. Portugal, Spain, Switzerland, Sweden. And so they were not really global events to a certain extent. Now, this COVID-19, yes, it is a global event. There's not even a single country or even a single small island in the world that has not been affected by COVID-19. And then again, for the first time, I think in history, schools were closed down for a long period of time in a high number of countries. Now, in the recent past, if I'm not mistaken, the only examples of countries that shut down all the schools for longer than just a few days, but all the school in the entire country were Liberia and Sierra Leone, when some years ago they shut down the schools, in one case for the entire school year, because of the Ebola virus crisis. Once again, it was a public health issue, a bit different from COVID-19, but that was, I think, the only situation, at least in recent history, where schools had to be shut down all over a country. Now, of course, this means that we don't really know the impact, we can just imagine it, the impact that this COVID-19 is going to have on this learning crisis. It's probably not just for Albania, of course, it's probably going to make it more acute if it was acute before, and if it was not acute before, it is possible that it may become acute, because we know in the case of Albania that probably the vast majority of children in one way or another could have the possibility, as I said, in one way or another, could have the possibility of following lessons from far. distant learning, blended learning, etc., etc. The TV and the radio and the internet, of course, etc. However, what we don't know, but we suspect, of course, is the impact that this sudden need to move to distant learning may have had on the learning of these kids. So the suspicion is that if we go for the PISA test now, well, we may find out that perhaps this positive upward trend that Albania, and not only Albania, what I'm saying probably applies to most of the other countries in the world, I would say, this upward trend may have been reversed by this sudden need to shift to blended learning or distant learning. Let me stop here and give the floor to our moderator, and if there are questions or interventions or whatever. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Roberto, for your remarks. Okay, now we will continue with the most exciting part of our event, the roundtable discussion on the first topic. But before the discussion begins, I'd like to give a quick rundown of the roundtable discussions, instructions. And before I continue with that, I would also like to remind all of you that this is being live streamed on our social media account. So the discussion round will last 90 minutes in total. We are going to discuss 3 subtopics. After a short elaboration of each subtopic by me, Enes, and Deborah, the floor will be yours to have your say and share your point of views, opinions, comments, and questions. If you want to say something, please comment on the chat window. Our team will prepare a list of speakers based on the order of comments. If you are recognized, you are going to have 2 minutes to voice your concern. And in order to comment and express yourself, if you want to, you have to write, "I got a point." And now, before I open the floor for the discussion, I would like to make some quick remarks regarding our first topic, learning crisis, learning challenges. During these unprecedented times, it becomes especially pressing to talk about the learning challenges that have been further deepened by the COVID-19 pandemic, just like Mr. Roberto De Bernardi mentioned. We intend to start the discussion based on the introduction made by the doctor and the choices you made in the application form. We included 3 multiple choice questions for each subtopic. And the question for the first subtopic was, what do you believe are some interesting ways of addressing the learning challenges in Albania? And the top 3 ranked answers to this question were: 1, by updating the current educational curriculum; 2, by increasing the coordination among partners at national and global levels to advance early childhood education; and 3, by providing teachers with necessary training. These are all indeed very interesting answers. And during the discussion, we look forward to hearing the rationale between behind these choices. On top of that, we also look forward to hearing your comments on issues like, should the private sector play a more expansive role when it comes to mitigating the learning crisis? How can the curriculum be updated to bridge the gap between what students are learning in school and what the job market is looking for? And lastly, what kind of policies should the governments utilize in order to increase the quality of the teachers? So once again, please be reminded that if you want to take the floor, you have to write "I got a point" in the chat and you will be recognized. Now the floor is open. Okay, so we will begin with Fiona. Fiona, you are recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Stevie, for the floor. Actually, me and Henry were, as I mentioned before, the youth delegates of Albania to the United Nations for this year. So we have started our consultation tour quite a long time ago. And we have met young people all over Albania and asked them which are their main concerns. And each time that we present them with all the SDGs, they all point to quality education, so SDG number 4. It is true that at first appear, we do have a very high educational level. A lot of people graduate university, etc., and a lot of children do go to school. But the quality of education is another reality. In the cycle of 100 years, I would say, we do have a major change of opinion about education and its importance. We've gone from why do you need education to education is a must and everybody should have it. And it is true that a lot of parents spend a lot of money on the education of their children as they perceived it as the most important asset. But the truth is that since the Second World War, a lot of things have not changed about the educational system in Albania, which means that we do have subjects that were very important during the Second World War, but are not quite important right now. We do have a very advanced program in physics, in chemistry, in sciences, but we do not have subjects or curriculum that includes information about the life skills that are needed right now. And when a student finishes high school, he does not have any abilities that may be, let's say, known or eligible for a person to enter to the global market. So a lot of things have to change. Also, this is a very tough year for education, the last school year, because Albania had a major earthquake and then the pandemic. And a lot of children in Albania have lost the opportunity to be part of the educational process with the pandemic, but in Durrës and Tirana, they have a really much more time they didn't attend school. So this questions all the quality of education they have received during this year. And all the graduate students of this year from high school, middle school, etc. Are questioned if they have the necessary skills to continue with other educational levels. It is true that we have made a lot of progress, for example, in all-inclusive education, but we still have to work harder and receive new curriculums that include life skills that are necessary. We should update to the modern ways of teaching and also bring a more technology related kind of education. This is all I have to say right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Fiona, for your very interesting remarks. Okay, so based on the order of just a second, please. Okay, so Arlind, you are recognized for 2 minutes.
Yes, thank you. So if I can call you Roberto, thank you for being here today. As I said before, my name is Arlind. I'm a high school student in Albania, and I would like to start my intervention while saying that being a high school student in Albania is a really big challenge, but also is fun. Why is fun? Because it's a really big challenge at first because we have to face with so many problems regarding testing, exams, and also the school curricula, which is not updated with the current labor market we have, not only in Albania, but also in the world. Furthermore, I also like to add that it's fun because maybe we can learn more than other children or other students abroad, especially in our nearby countries such as Western Balkan countries. But I would like to add you something regarding what you said before for the quality of education. Maybe in Albania we can have a better quality of education rather than in Germany or in Italy. But do you think that the quality and the evaluation of the diplomas in Albania are equal with the German and Italy? Are the Albanian students equal regarding their diploma when they apply for a university abroad? For this reason, I would like to be based on the European Educational Framework Index, which says that in Albania, the maximum index which is 10 in Albania is 4, which is really low for a country. And regarding to other Western Balkan countries and their educational system, I would like to be based in Serbia. So Serbia is one of the countries in the region that is more developed in the educational system than anyone else, even if it is not part of European Union. And for this reason, I'd like to say and to ask you, what Serbia has more and what Serbia has done more in order to achieve this high quality of education, and why Albania can do that, bearing in mind that they are both candidate countries for EU and not part of European Union. Another thing that I would like to add is that in Albania, we have, I don't know if you have heard about the Fund of Excellence from the Ministry of Education and Sport, which was delayed last month from our Prime Minister. And I think this is really bad, as we have many countries, not in the region, but also in Europe and the world, that offer full scholarship for their students in order to study in best universities. In Albania, we don't have it, unfortunately, more. And for this reason, Albania students have to face many problems regarding paying tuition fees or paying also their accommodation when studying abroad.
Arlene, please try to finish up.
I'm sorry. So last thing I would like to add is regarding the technology, but I want to express my concerns and ideas later on. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Arlene. Now I'd like to give the floor to wait, because there's something with this. Just a second, please. Okay, Alexis Satka, you are recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you so much, and thank you so much, everyone, for the points that you made. While I was listening to Fiona, she did an awesome job, and I remember that she said that the education system has not changed, and that's what I would like to focus on. Like, I just finished high school, and on my second year, I was actually an exchange student in the United States. So I'm an alumna of the YES program, so I've kind of seen two systems of education. And one thing that I keep thinking about is how we've developed and we've grown so much as human beings, but the education system hasn't changed like in so long. It's almost the same. Like, we have new textbooks and some newer ways of introducing material, but it's still, in Albania, for the most part, you learn, you get tested, you learn, you get tested, and it's almost like something mechanical that makes students less interested. Like, the subjects that you really like, you're going to focus on them a lot, and then the other subjects, you're just either going to feel lazy about, or you're going to learn them just to get a good grade. And I see a problem with this, because I think that everything is interesting, and that the way that we teach students here, like, it draws them away. And even with what Arlene says, I don't think that we have motivated our students enough to push further, because we have issues still like corruption in our education system. And I just feel so sad, because so many students who really want to work hard and make our country better, like, they get drawn to leaving the country because they don't feel like they can accomplish their true potential here. And it's very sad, because we have a great country and we have a smart population. And yep, that's all I wanted to say.
Thank you very much, Alexis, for your remarks. Okay, now, before I entertain the other motions from the other participants, I'd like to, in order to keep the discussion running as smoothly as possible, now I will give the floor to Dr. De Bernardi to have his say vis-a-vis the comments made by the previous speakers. Roberto, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Well, I mean, first of all, congratulations to all the speakers. I'm really impressed by the quality of the comments. I can assure you that comments that are so deep and so well thought are rarely heard even during the UNICEF meetings from professionals who have been working in this sort of development field for years and years and years. So congratulations. If Albania can count on students like you people, I think this country has a great future, no doubt about it. Of course, as long as you remain in the country, because if you leave your country, well, that may be another issue, but that is another subject, perhaps for another discussion. Now, I cannot really, also because of lack of time, address every single issue that you have raised. However, a couple of them, yes, I would like to say a few words. Well, there's no doubt that those sort of actions that were mentioned by one of you, the need to update the curriculum, to strengthen the coordination and the teacher training, of course, they are crucial if we want to improve the quality of education. On the other hand, there were some remarks about the content, or if I'm not mistaken, the content of the curriculum. curricula, and I would say the sort of disconnect that may exist between the curricula and nowadays reality. I mean, the curricula should be, in my view at least, should be functional to those two sort of aspirational goals that one may have when engaged in education. When one goal, as I said, is to become a better person, and the other goal is to become someone who's going to be competitive in the labor market. And of course, a lot will depend on the content of the curricula. Now, if I have to propose one single change as far as the content of the curricula is concerned, definitely I would go for digital skills. Not only because of the COVID-19 situation and the need to be prepared to a new normal, as we often hear this expression, but also because it's going to be something useful for the future. I mean, to be frank with you, my own kids, even if they are your age, so they are not so young, but they can hardly know how to write with the pen, because basically they have learned how to write directly on the computer. They don't know, for instance, how to write in cursive. And this was something that was the basis when I was in primary school some centuries ago. Now, related to this, there is the whole discussion about vocational training. Now, I know that there are some stakeholders, not necessarily the Ministry of Education, but some stakeholders, like some bilateral donors, let's call them in this way, here in Albania, who like to invest and to promote vocational training. Now, in UNICEF, we have not yet decided clearly what we would like to do on vocational training. Personally, I am not a great fan of vocational training, because someone in the past used to say that vocational training is a way of sort of perpetuating the disparities that exist in the society. Meaning, if I am a plumber, well, my son, I'm going to put it in vocational training, is going to become a plumber and is going to remain a plumber. If I am a worker in a large car factory, well, my son is not going to go for mechanical engineering. That is for the people who are rich. My son is going for vocational training to become a good mechanic. I mean, of course, it is not like this. It is not as simple as this, but to me, there is a certain degree of truth in this sort of vision. That was not my vision, of course, but there is a certain degree of truth. So, as I was saying before, I'm not so convinced that vocational training is the response to the need to be better skilled, to be better equipped, to enter the labor market with better chances of getting a good employment. Also because I don't want to downplay, of course, vocational training, but to me, without wanting to downplay vocational training addresses just the second of the two aspirational goals that I mentioned before, meaning vocational training is going to make you competitive if you want to become, as I said, with all the due respect, of course, for plumbers or workers or electricians, etc., etc. It may also make you a better person, but a different type of education may, in my view, achieve both aspirational goals. Make you a better person and make you competitive in the labor market. The second thing that I wanted to say, well, I don't know about the Serbian education system, so I would need to ask my colleague, who is actually a compatriot of mine, who is a UNICEF representative in Belgrade in Serbia, about the Serbian educational system. However, I can say a few words about two other educational systems that I don't know well either, but of course I have heard something about them. One is Finland, that is considered to be perhaps the best educational system in the world, and the other one is Singapore, that is also considered to be one of the best educational systems in the world. As I said, I don't know them in details, I don't know them in depth, but some principles, for instance, of Finland. One principle is that it is not that important the number of days you spend at school, is more important the quality time that you have at school. And Finland, as you know, is a large country that it is not densely populated, and for children who live very far from school, it may be easier to go to school just 3 or 4 days a week instead of 5 or even 6 days a week. For instance, in my own countries, even now it is still possible for the ones who choose a certain way, let's say, of learning, of schooling. It is possible to go to school. It is possible, it's still necessary to go to school 6 days a week. And I did go to school 6 days a week until I completed high school. Even in high school, I was going to school also on Saturday, although the day was slightly shorter than the other days. Now, in Finland, they are saying that, well, the number of days you go to school is not that important. It's more important the quality time you have in school. And the other thing that they say in Finland is that it is very important, the curriculum, etc., but you also need to leave some space to the, let's say, creativity of the children, especially young children, and to let them learn what they like to learn, and to let them learn in the way they like to learn. Now, as I said, I come from the past century, but this is something that goes beyond my imagination in the school system I was some centuries ago. It was impossible for a child, let's say, to learn what he or she wanted to learn in the way he or she wanted to learn. This is about Finland. Now, about Singapore, the most important message about the Singapore experience is that unlike what a lot of people think, what makes the difference is not really the ratio teacher-student. It's not that if you are one teacher and if you have a class of 10 or 15 kids, those 10 or 15 kids will learn more because there are only few with one teacher. What makes the difference is the quality of the teacher. If you have one good teacher, excellent teacher with 30 children, and if you have one ordinary teacher with 10 or 15 children, those 30 children taught by an excellent teacher will learn more than the 10 or 15 children with just one teacher. So some of you mentioned teacher training before. This is really crucial. And when we are talking about maybe later on about inclusive education and the support the teachers, this is going to become even more evident. The teacher training is really crucial. Let me stop here. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Roberto, for your very interesting remarks. Okay, now I will continue with 3 more participants. Just give me 1 second, please. Okay, so Leonardo, you're recognized for 2 minutes.
Okay, so personally, I would like to thank everybody that is here on the meeting. And honestly, I can't lie, most of the topics that I wanted to talk about have already been talked about. So I'm just going to try and keep all my arguments as short as possible and try to elaborate on as much topics as I can. So honestly, I really wanted to talk about and see as how we can view this whole pandemic, and also for us Albanians, especially in Durrës and Tirana, the earthquake, as a way of how we can update our educational system. It's a crucial time, and I guess this is a problem that many countries are currently facing, of how to digitalize and how to improve even more the educational system. Because right now, where the actual physical presence of students in schools is impossible, it's a time that is requiring the most innovation and the most thought about how we can actually improve the learning process. So I personally think one of the great pillars of how the whole educational system can be improved as a whole is definitely by digitalization, especially in Albania we're talking, because in other countries that's a whole other process that has been for years implemented. Here we're still using very basic equipments, outdated equipments that these are truly what is leading to the high schoolers and the teenagers of Albania going into the market, and also the ones that finish university without the correct assets of equipments to go there. And actually, I also wanted to address the educational system, as the doctor mentioned earlier, the educational system in Finland, and especially in the Nordic countries. That sort of educational system is what I also personally think that would be the best suited also for Albanians. Not at such a drastic difference, 3 days and just studying what you like, but the actual step to improve and try to make students and teachers close together and actually try to teach students what they like, because that's one of the main things that they don't even learn about. There are many students and teenagers that right now don't even know what they want to go, what they want to do with their careers. And that all comes as a direct result of the teachers not being able to seep into through them and actually make them find out what's their talent and what they do really like to do. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Leonardo. Okay, so now I'd like to give the floor to Gabio. You're recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you for giving me the chance to be here. I am Gabio Tabaco. I'm 20 years old, currently studying applied informatics. I am part of the youth advisory group of the OSCE presence in Albania, and also I manage portalistudentore.al, which is an online student community. What I would like to share with you is how I think that there is a real gap between education in Tirana and education in other places in Albania, because I come from Gramsh, and I've done my high school and 3 years of my middle school here. And I know for a fact that students in smaller places such as Gramsh or even other places other than Tirana get grades more easily. And that's for sure true. And what this does is that it makes students that are not as good as other students in Tirana, for example, get degrees that they would not otherwise get if it wasn't for how they get grades easily. So one challenge I'd like to put in the spotlight is bullying. So we have a lot of challenges in Albania. I can assure you about what I'm going to say because I've lived through it. So I lived in Greece before. I came here when I was in the 7th grade. And I came in Gramsh and started school here. And I have to say that I faced a lot of bullying. And I have to say to you, challenges in education in Albania become way more dominant when bullying comes along. And it's a very bad situation to be in. I would really like the Albanian government or the ministry to implement programs that are of support to students that get bullied, because I don't really see a way that this problem is being tackled. You might say that there are psychologists around in schools or other social services, but the thing is that these ones do not do the job, especially in smaller towns like Gramsh. It's a very sad reality. I don't know about the situation in Tirana. Probably psychologists and staff are more aware there, but here they just, okay, I can see your reactions and I understand that it's the same thing everywhere. So that's a real big problem for me. Another big problem that I have while managing the Portalis Mentor community, I get a lot of messages from seniors in high school that they don't know what career path to choose. I get messages that ask me, hey, please tell me what, where should I go to school for? What degree should I pursue? The problem is that I cannot tell you what degree you should pursue. You should decide that yourself based on your abilities and what you think you can do. And that's a real big problem for me. Like, career education in high school should be really focused into making students understand what they can do and what they should do with their lives and their educations, and choose a great career path. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Fabio. Sorry to interrupt you, but it's because of time constraints. Okay, now I'll give the floor to Thea. You are recognized for 2 minutes.
Sorry, I believe there was somebody else before me, but
okay, that's fine. You can start, and then I can recognize the other person.
Okay, just to be fair with everybody. Actually, thank you for doing this. It's a very important topic. My name is Thea. I am finishing my Master of Science in Public Administration, and currently I'm working in an NGO which focuses in education. So it's very nice to be here. So thank you for the invitation. I would like to express my compliments to everybody that was making their speeches before me, and to compliment Stevie for the very enthusiastic moderation.
Thank you.
I would like just to make a short comment about the topic of training of teachers, because I see this is very important and very necessary. What happens currently in Albania is that the Ministry of Education, Sports and Youth has took a decision to raise the level of acceptance in university to the degree 8, to A degree. You should have a degree 8 in order to become part of the university. But what happens, and a very big concern of professors, is that when you start study for biology or literature or chemistry or whatever, you do not necessarily become a teacher. You may just become a biologist or something else. You do not want to become a teacher. What happens is that immediately after finishing the bachelor, you decide if you want to become a teacher or you want to become something more than this. And this is the moment where we have a gap. And then this is the moment when students with very low, let's say, average of grades, they goes to masters, and they are not very good trained in becoming teachers. So this is a problem that the Ministry of Education has not predicted before. So this is a concern that comes from professors, and this is one of the measures that the Ministry of Education has done lately without thinking of it very good and thinking of all the consequences that this may have. And I'm actually mentioning this because there are many others like this. And there are many others in our system of education that prevents us for having very good quality teachers and very good trained teachers. This is all I have for now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tab. Okay, now we'll entertain one last speech by Arnold. You're recognized for 2 minutes.
Hello, guys. My name is Arnold. I'm currently at Sami Farashri High School. And I wanted to talk about the rural Albania. There are other parts of Albania. For example, I was born in Tirana, but in Malakaster, for example, where my origin is, there are schools that are completely destroyed, and the students can go there to get taught by other teachers. So the situation is miserable. I've been in Germany to see the schools in other villages, and I've seen that in parts of Germany that we consider villages here in Albania, there were terrific schools with electric boards, with high-tech equipments that were used to teach other students. And another factor that we have a crisis here in Albania is that because in northern Albania there are children that can't attend school because they will be killed if they get if they go outside their school house. I'm sorry, and this is a very big problem. All students should go to school, not only the students from Tirana or Durrës, but others from rural regions too. This is my point. Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much, Arnold. That was really indeed very interesting. And you can also talk about during our last subtopics, which we're going to talk more about inclusive education. Now I'd like to give the floor back to Roberto to give his final remarks regarding the comments made by the previous speakers on this first subtopic. Yes.
Thank you. Well, once again, very, very interesting and thought-provoking remarks and comments. First, let me also say that I'm not from Malakaster, but I've been to Malakaster myself, to Balsh and some other villages in that area, since some of you apparently are from Malakaster. Well, first of all, I think that someone mentioned more or less clearly that the pandemic may be an opportunity. I fully agree. I mean, the objective should not really be to go back the way we were before. It should be the sort of triple B, build back better. So we should take, well, I can't say the advantage because it has not been an advantage, but again, take this opportunity, if you want to look at it as an opportunity, and try to do things better than they were before. I think the example of blended learning, this combination of digital and physical presence, etc., I think in education, I think is quite a good example. The pandemic has somehow forced all the education ministries, not only the Minister of Education in Albania, to move more and more towards exploiting better, I would say, the potential of digitalization, of distant learning, etc., etc. Of course, we are still very far from having distant learning fully replacing the traditional way of learning, and probably it will never do that. And I think it's fair to say that, I mean, the physical presence of students in the class, particularly for very young children, not maybe for kids and young people of your age, but for children in primary school, well, digital learning will not be able to 100% replace the old way of learning. However, it can complement, reinforce, strengthen, improve the old way of learning. There's no doubt about it. And I fully agree when one of you said that the pandemic may be an opportunity. Yes, and we shouldn't miss it. That's important. Now, someone wrote, what makes a good teacher? I don't know, but I can tell you about my personal experience. As I said, I'm a medical doctor, so I graduated in my hometown, Genova, in Italy. And then after that, I went to the Liverpool School of Tropical Medicine, and I took a postgraduate degree in tropical medicine before going to Africa. And there was a big difference between my university professors in Italy and the university, unfortunately, and the university professors at the Liverpool School of Tropical Medicine. Now, it is true, to be fair to both of them, that the university in Italy was a public university. Everybody could go there. It was basically for free. It was literally peanuts. Now things have changed a little bit. It still is affordable by everybody. But at that time, it was really basically for free. While the Liverpool School of Tropical Medicine, I mean, you had to pay relatively. I was sponsored by the NGO for which I went to work in Africa, fortunately, but it was relatively expensive. So it was a different type of scenario. But really, the bonds, let's say, the teacher were able to establish with the students could not be imagined. To the point that when I was in Africa, 1 year later, we had the problems, myself and a colleague of mine, the two doctors in that small rural hospital, with some TB patients that were not responsive to drugs. This may be of interest to the one of you who said, I would like to study medicine, perhaps a particular interest, at least for her. So I decided to take the pen, because at that time computers were still a luxury for only very few people. So to take the pen and write a letter to that doctor, to a particular teacher, a particular professor at the Liverpool School, who said, some of you may go to Africa or to third world countries. When you are there, if you have a problem, please do not hesitate to write to me, blah, blah, blah. Of course, I thought that he would have not replied. Actually, he did reply, asking actually for more information, because he needed some more information to be even more helpful, etc., etc. So to me, what really makes a good teacher is the capacity of establishing a deep, I would say, relationship with the student. As I said, in my experience in the university in Italy, where we are basically two people who hardly knew each other. There, we were not friends, of course, because he was a professor, I was a student, but we were, I would say, two people, two professionals who were on the same side of the barricade. He was trying to teach, I was trying to learn, and we had a common objective, and that was really something extremely important. Now, one of you raised the issue of bullying. Well, this is something that is very close to the UNICEF heart, let's say, not only for education, because bullying, of course, does not happen only in schools, but also for child protection, and more perhaps for child protection. Now, if I think about, again, my own experience, when I was a child, I think bullying already existed. I mean, how many times, like me, The ones of you who wear glasses were called, I don't know, four eyes. I mean, in Italy, many years ago, the ones with glasses were called four eyes. I mean, I didn't care. Maybe the ones who had told me four eyes was a bit overweight, so I could tell me, you shut up, you fatty. And that was finished. Now, if a child is called four eyes, I am sure that there will be someone else with a mobile phone filming the child who is being called four eyes, then putting the video on the WhatsApp chat, on YouTube, etc., etc., etc. So I don't want to criminalize, let's say, the social network, I mean, the technology, because the technology is extremely helpful. Imagine what would have happened with the lockdown without the technology. Literally, everybody would have lost half a year of school. So thanks to the technology, a lot of people, in spite of the problems, as I said, have managed to progress. So thanks, technology. However, this issue of the bullying is unfortunately fueled by the technology. So we have to find a way of making good use of the technology and not use the technology to fuel this bullying that is clearly unacceptable. Even if it is just saying four eyes to someone who's wearing a glass, because we are not all the same. Some people may not care, but other people may care. And unfortunately, there have been cases where people have committed suicide exactly because of bullying. When bullying is brought to the extreme, I remember, for instance, a case in Colombia of a child, because he was, I think, 16 or 17, so a young person, but still a child legally, who was apparently gay, and he was being bullied because of his being gay, and he committed suicide. And it was, of course, a big scandal because the school had not been able correctly to protect him, and the state had not been able to protect him. This is clearly written down in the Convention on the Rights of the Child. Is a right of each one of us to be protected by the state. Each one of us is a child. Well, I'm not a child anymore, but the ones of you who are less than 18, they are in need, they have the right, let's say, to be able to count on a sort of special protection, exactly because they are particularly vulnerable, because they are young and they are less experienced. And I mean, it goes without saying. So definitely, bullying is something that should be fought, and it is a priority for UNICEF and also for the Ministry of Education. I must say, I have spoken with the Minister of Education herself several times, with the current minister as well as with the previous minister, and they are both quite sensitive to this problem. And I can assure you that it will not be forgotten. As far as UNICEF is concerned, we will continue to try and invest on the fight against bullying. Psychologists, yes, I agree with you. The numbers are important. The quality, well, we go back to the issue of teacher training. And as I said before, if we are going to talk soon about inclusive education, this is also something, the issue of the support teachers, that is going to be crucial, is going to be extremely important. Last point, rural areas, yes, there is clearly a big gap between rural and urban areas. This is not only for Albania, it's for many other countries, not all countries, of course, but many countries. And it is true that children from some, at least children from some rural areas are more at risk of dropping out of school, of not even enrolling from school, not completing schools, learning less, for a series of reasons. Of course, as I said before, as I just said, there is a series of reasons. One of the reasons is like a vicious circle. Why there are schools in such a bad shape in rural areas? There are many reasons. One reason is that, well, there are very few kids. It's not, let's say, economically viable it shouldn't be this way, because I said at the very beginning, leave no one behind is one of the buzzwords of the UN and of UNICEF. But the reality is that if you have very few kids, the tendency is to have those multi-grade classrooms. Of course, the quality of learning in multi-grade classrooms, when you have 10, 15, 20 kids, 1 from grade 1, 3 from grade 2, 3 from grade 3, 5 from grade 4, well, it can't be the same. It goes without saying. And so people may tend, this may be one of the reasons why they tend to leave the countryside and come to urban areas, or not even come to urban areas, but in another countries. I mean, you know the situation better than me, of course, because I have just arrived in Albania 2 years ago, so I can't really see the difference. But everybody tells me that there is an astonishing, clear difference between number of people who used to live in rural areas 20 years ago, and number of people who are living in rural areas now. And of course, the number, well, they may not make a difference between rural and urban areas, but the numbers say that the population in Albania is decreasing. It's decreasing not only because the fertility rate has gone down, so women make less children for a series of reasons, also good reasons, because perhaps more women are employed. And when women are employed, even if there is a very good sort of protection system with a lot of maternity leaves, with, I don't know, free kindergartens and the financial support, etc., everywhere in the world, they make, on average, less children. But also because a lot of people have left the country, because they think, probably they're right, there are not so many opportunities, and therefore their objective is leaving the country. Let me stop here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Roberto, for your very interesting remarks. And I know sometimes it's very difficult to address every single question raised by the audience. So thank you for that. Okay, now I also want to thank everyone for your very, very interesting points during the discussion on the first subtopic. And now it's time to jump to the second one, which is going to be introduced by Enes. The floor is yours.
Hi everybody, I'm Enes. I'm going to lead you to the second part of the discussion round. Yeah, after an insightful part of the discussion where you voiced your opinions and Mr. De Bernardi replied, we are going to shift the discussion and further elaborate another crucial element concerning youth education. It is time to talk about the inclusive and equitable quality education. As you have seen on the application form, such element plays an essential role in the future we want to build, since it is conceptually based on very vital concepts of equity and inclusion. I want to repeat, equity and inclusion are vital concepts where such subtopic is based on, and you should focus in it. And as well, I wanted to announce that nowadays, according to UNICEF Education Strategy 2019-2030, inclusive and equitable quality education is a paradoxical issue concerning all the countries, especially in Western Balkans, hence Albania. I say paradoxical because statistically, as Mr. Di Bernardi said earlier, statistically we have the numbers, but it is a common opinion spread all over the population of such countries, and especially Albania, that we do not have an equitable or inclusive quality education. Then this issue requires a very serious attention. Why is it happening? There are several factors affecting such campaign, ranging from lack of high-level political commitment to prioritize early childhood education, in education sector plans and strategies, inadequate budget allocations by governments and donors, limited institutional capacity to plan, implement, and assure quality at scale of early childhood education programs, and limited coordination and coherence among partners at national and global levels, as we mentioned even before. It is highly important to mention that such problems take roots in the early childhood education period, where there may exist significant disparities in access and learning in relation to wealth, gender, location, inequity of education, investment, etc. This is a very brief introduction of the subtopic, and I can't wait to hear your opinions, and I can't wait to hear your questions about this subtopic. Don't forget that in order to be recognized, you have to comment in the chat window, I got a point, and you'll be heard. But first, I would like to start with Henry and what he has to say. Henry, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you for the floor. So as we have seen in the recent times, because of the pandemics, there's been a shift towards online learning and online platforms, and this has not been an easy step. So educational systems all over the world had to adopt to these kind of changes, and I must admit that not all of them have been equally successful. So we can look at the equity and equality of this a situation into a global level, but also into a local level. And even though there are many positive aspects of online learning, and they have given us a better understanding on how do we use this advances in artificial intelligence, we need also to focus more on the digital gap that has been created and has been more evident during the time of pandemics. The digital gap, by that I mean that it has created many different opportunities. Some of marginalized groups and the ones that are most vulnerable have not had the possibility or the access to online learning. So this has created a gap and a destruction in the educational system. So we need to make sure that no one is left behind in this case. And we need to make sure that digitalization goes parallel with the involvement of the society and with inclusiveness, by having inclusiveness in the center of its development. So I really do believe that while we focus on finding new ways of implementing strategies concerning artificial intelligence into our educational systems, it is very important that we keep in mind that those who are the most vulnerable are not left behind in this case. And the last thing that I would like to say is regarding the first topic, I really think that a huge challenge, if we do make a conclusion to everything, is that from all the discussions that me and Fiona have had with the young individuals that we have met during our time, transformation, there is a need for younger individuals to transform the educational system and to make it more adaptable to the 21st century. Thank you for the floor, and this was my work.
Thank you very much, Henry. Now it's time for Anya to take the floor. Anya, the floor is yours.
Hello, everyone. I listened carefully to all the points presented, like in the first session and now in the second one. Now, my problem with education in Albania is that, like, I have, like many of you, firsthand, like, experience the problems that arise from it and the challenges. So regarding what I think, the application, the process of application to university, it's not inclusive at all. Like, I don't think it's fair at all that we are judged by GPA, which is, in my opinion, should not be considered like the main component to be judged to get in a certain degree, but should be like one of the side components. So the fact that we are just considered by our own GPA means that this is not inclusive at all, especially in this time when many people have not had the opportunity to do online learning and to actually, you know, get properly educated. So in regards to this, they have had lower results in like different exams that they have taken. And this has led for them to get lower GPA and to not get the degree that they want, and maybe not get in the university at all. So what we see in this process of application to the university, we see that like this just promotes elitism. This promotes like multi-generational poverty between different youths. So this is like one of my main problems with regarding inclusivity. And I see it myself because I am like currently applying to university. And even if I have high grades, it's because I've had opportunities to be accessible to these grades. Another thing regarding like the learning challenges, I think we do not talk at all about civic education, about youth empowerment, about like other important components like critical thinking in our schools. Like this is just like briefly experienced in extracurriculars, and it's not like a main and important part of the curriculum. And this leads to lower safe spaces between classes. Like children and youth are afraid to actually like voice their thoughts because they're afraid that their teacher is not gonna like it, that their teacher is gonna judge them by it. And like what we raise is not people who succeed because of our education system, but succeed despite of it. And for me, like this is one of the main problems regarding inclusivity and regarding, you know, just education in general. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anya. Erleta, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I'm Erleta. I'm a high school student at Nine Pressure School in Douros. I very much agree with every argument the previous speakers made. About inclusive education, although the numbers say that we have many children that attend like primary school, like I think more than 90% of children attend primary school. Many children, such as Roma children or children with disability, do not enjoy their right to education. Also, I'd like to say something about the struggle that schools have to prepare children for 21st century skills they need so they can be productive citizens and like actual skills they need for school and work. So about the arguments that Anya made, that people like students are not going to universities that they actually like because of GPA, that's very true. That's a problem we have. Because I see that many students are going for universities they don't like or they don't want to be in just because they can't get in the actual university they want because of the GPA. And that's a very big problem. Also, I'd like to talk about the passive abandonment of school. Many children are going to school, but they are not learning anything because they don't appreciate the learning system, or they don't have they don't trust the learning system. That's what I think. That's all I have to say about this topic.
Thank you very much, Erleta. And I'm going to go back to Gavio. Gavio, the floor is yours.
So for educational inclusiveness, I would like to talk about the situation with education in Albania after COVID-19. So as you know, most of, if not all of the classes went online, especially in the public universities. One big and huge problem I would like to address here is the fact that instead of giving people that have economical problems or that are with economical support ways to help them so that they can go through their degree even though the pandemic was on and the education shifted online. So there's a problem because if you want to watch online classes, you'd have to pay for internet. Problem is that I know people, one of my friends has this issue. I know that she cannot afford internet and access to it because of her economical situation. So she was mentioning to me that there were these problems with how her university handled the issue. She's in a public university, by the way, and with the tariffs they have to still pay, even though education is online, and also exams and other materials they need to study in order to do the exams online, were a real big problem for them. There was a solution by the Albanian government. I'm not sure, but I think they halved the prices of internet packages for internet for students. But I don't think that solves the issue because still, I think that it would be better if they would offer students that are in economical support free internet only for the selected programs that schools use to teach online. rather than give the entire population internet in half, like half of the price. So I think that that's a real big problem. And I mentioned this because I know that school now is over for, not for every university, but I know that some universities have finished and did the exams and all that. But the thing is that we might still continue having online classes. So I think that this is a very important topic to discuss about, and I think that the government should find a solution to help people that cannot afford internet and aid them in order for them to get proper educated. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, Gabriel. And the last speaker for this subtopic is Arnold. Arnold, the floor is yours.
Hi, I wanted to talk about another topic. In schools, there are children that are gifted, that are better than others in such as maths or other subjects. But in some cases, teachers only teach these students 2 or 3 in the class, and the other part of the class is left behind. They gave some examples of the lesson, and then they only work with these gifted students. I think that in Albania there are other states have these institutions. There should be institutions that are for these gifted children, for these people that are better than the others, and and the other students should also have the opportunity to learn from these teachers, not only the gifted one, because in some, that's why in some cases the school here in Albania is not very inclusive or equitable in such as other countries like Germany, where I've been and I have experience. This was my point. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now I'm going to give the floor back to Mr. De Bernardi. I'm sorry that we delayed your speech, but we thought the discussion would better shift into a more dynamic manner. Now it's your time to show us your opinion overall, and as well as to reply to the questions that the participants made.
Thank you. No, as I said before, I hope I am not talking too much because in the interest of time, as I said, my interest is really to listen from you, to hear from you, because I mean, all the remarks, all the comments, suggestions you have made, criticism, sometimes not necessarily to me or to UNICEF, but to the system in general, are extremely useful, and I am taking notes. We are actually in the process now of working on the next country program for UNICEF together with the government of Albania, of course, and education will be a very important component of this, and I mean, this session is quite timely and useful. Now, once again, I would like to address some of the issues that you have mentioned, starting with equity and the inclusion, that I think the first one of you who intervened mentioned. Definitely the two things are somehow related, I would say closely related. Now, in my view, what is the difference in very simple words between equity and equality? Now, equality is allocating, let's say, resources according to the numbers. Equity is allocating resources according to the needs. So, for instance, the taxes should not be equal, should be equitable. The ones who earn more should pay more. The ones who earn less should contribute less or nothing, maybe in some cases. Just to give you a basic, very basic example. Now, as far as inclusion is concerned, we are talking about few people, but as some of you have also said, we have to leave no one behind, and we have to be inspired by principles of equity and not necessarily equality. So, of course, these kids would require a higher investment if we are just looking at the number. So with the same investment, we may benefit 100 children, but since we don't want to leave no one behind, we have to invest more, perhaps, to target fewer children. But in the long term, this is going to be an investment that is going to pay off. If we really want to grow, let's say, in a society that is not, one of you used the expression elitism and multi-generational poverty. I think these are two expressions that to me apply to vocational learning. That is the vocational training, sorry. That is the point that I would have liked to make, but it's good that one of you made it. To me, vocational training perpetuates elitism and multi-generational poverty, but that may be another discussion perhaps. Now, going back to inclusion, there are, I would say, several categories of children who are at risk of being excluded from school, either not joining school from the very beginning or dropping out of school. And some of these categories have actually been mentioned by you. Well, one category are the poorest children for a series of reasons. For instance, Gavio, I think, gave the example of his fellow university student who has difficulties in getting connected because of economic difficulties. And there may be other children who may not be able to go to school, or they may have to drop out of school, not even talking about going to university, because they have to work and support the family. Another category are the children, some children at least, residing in rural areas. For them, it may be a logistics issue going to school, because perhaps they have to walk for relatively long distance every morning to go and every afternoon to go back home. A third category clearly are the ethnic minorities. I mean, I would say that all over the world, Roma people, not only children, are discriminated against. Albania is not an example. Also in all the other European countries, Roma people are not particularly well seen, I would say. Some countries have been more successful than others, but in integrated them. But yes, ethnic minorities, in the case of Albania, I understand that Roma and Egyptian minorities are the ones who are particularly at risk. But yes, they are at risk of being left out. And then definitely children with disabilities. Of course, children with disabilities, we have a wide range of situations. We have children who are on wheelchair, and for them, sometimes making sure the school is inclusive means simply building a ramp to allow them to get to the classroom. That's it. Other cases, children who have, let's say, mental issues, like children with autism or children with other even more serious problems, support teachers are key. And that is what the point that I wanted to make as far as inclusion and support teacher, and that is the point that is now coming. One of you before said psychologists, okay, the number is increased, but where is the quality? Or at least there is a question mark about quality. Now, for the support teachers, it's the same thing. There's no doubt about it. I mean, not only I have spoken with the Minister of Education herself and other education officials, but also with a lot of principals in various schools, including perhaps one school in Balche, meaning in Malacaster. Now I don't remember, but it is possible that I have also visited a couple of schools in the Balche area in Malacaster municipality, among many other municipalities. And all of them, I would say, with no exception, they have told me that yes, the number of support teachers over the last few years has increased dramatically, doubled, even tripled. However, the country started from such a low number of support teachers that even if the number has tripled, we are still quite far, even in terms of number, to get to a situation where we can reasonably say, yes, maybe with some few exceptions, but if we leave these exceptions aside, the support teachers are present in a sufficient number. We are still far from that. Moreover, many of these support teachers, unfortunately, didn't receive any training at all, meaning they were teachers who before they worked probably well as normal teachers, then they couldn't continue to work as normal teachers because there were no more children to teach, to be taught. Because those children, for the reason that we had explained, we had discussed before, people who leave, people who move from rural areas to urban areas, etc., etc. So these teachers were left with no children. And they were somehow redeployed as support teachers. but they didn't have any specific technical preparation to act as support teacher. And the very, very little experience that I have as a medical doctor dealing with the mental conditions, I can assure you that it's not easy at all for someone who doesn't have any basic, at least, preparation to deal with autistic children or even children with other sort of mental issues or even other sort of disabilities, unless the disability is a disability that can be, well, I cannot say corrected, but let's say the condition that makes the child somehow at risk of not going to school can be corrected. The example, the most typical example, is a ramp for a child on a wheelchair. Without a ramp, the child cannot go to school, as simple as this. If you build a ramp, the child can go to school on his own, without the need of someone to push him, etc., etc. So apart from this situation, there is a need for support teachers with good preparation. Then, absolutely true, one of you said that the lockdown may exacerbate the disparities. It is true. There's no doubt about it. The better off they have learned and they will continue to learn. The ones who are at risk of being left behind, unfortunately, some of them may have been left behind. And it is going to be very difficult to bring them back into the education system and to make sure that they learn and to make sure that they catch up. Already now, before the COVID-19, there is evidence. Before I was talking about 13 years of schooling, but in reality, only 9 years of learning. Now, if we look at, let's say, the quintiles, the highest, the top quintile, meaning the richest fifth of the population, children, students belonging to that richest fifth, already learn much more than the lowest fifth of the population, meaning the poorest 20% of the Albanian children. They learn on average 1.5 years less than the top. They go to school for the same number of years, but the top 20%, the children belonging to the top 20%, learn 1.5 years more than the lowest 20%. Same thing if we break down urban-rural. Urban children learn on average 1 year more, same number of school years, but 1 year more than the rural children, because the quality of teaching is better. On average, of course. There are always exceptions, but on average is that. Now, I don't know what exactly GPA stands for, but I presume that might be a kind of a grading system that one gets when the student graduates from high school, right? Is that correct? Yes, some people are saying yes, apparently. Okay, now, I'm not an expert in this. I can just tell you once again, my personal experience. When I was a student in Italy, access to the Faculty of Medicine was free for all, meaning if you had studied the way I did high school, the so-called classical high school, that was considered to be perhaps the most difficult type of high school, where people had to study Latin, ancient Greek, etc., you could go to university. If you had studied a sort of a technical type of high school, you could also go to university to study medicine or to study whatever you wanted. The result was that there were a lot of people, of course, who went to university, but there were also a lot of people who stayed in the university forever. Because it was not, at least at that time, I don't know here in Albania, like in other countries where if you don't pass a certain number of exams per year, you are out, or at least you are given a sort of 1 year grace where you can catch up, and if you don't catch up, you are out. At that time, you can continue and continue and continue, and after the end of in the case of medicine and surgery was 6 years. After the end of the 6 years, you can continue to be, in Italian, we used to be called the fuori corso, meaning out of the course. So you continue to add, and there was no limit, basically. And there were a lot of people who were getting into university and staying there forever, almost forever. Then also because the number of doctors had become too high, and then of course we pay the consequences of this other choice right now when we had to count, thanks God, on Albanian doctors to go to go to Italy and help the Italian doctors in dealing with the COVID-19 emergency. They decided to set up a sort of admission exam. Now, this admission exam perhaps may be seen as elitism and multi-generational poverty, I don't know, because of course the ones who came out of high school better prepared, well, definitely had more chances of passing this admission exam. I don't know. I don't have really a clear answer. I don't know what other countries, frankly speaking, are doing, because I mean, university is something that is already outside of, I would say, of the UNICEF mandate. You are already too old for UNICEF because you are not children anymore. It's not that we are not interested in young people, but our focus is mainly on young people less than 18, without excluding, of course, the others, because it wouldn't be a good idea to abandon someone once he reaches 18, but it is not really the UNICEF focus, at least here in Albania. So I cannot really tell you anything more, but I think that one has to strike a balance between a sort of a free-for-all approach, because I don't think that also that approach is good to fight against elitism and multi-generational poverty, and I am against elitism and multi-generational poverty. So we have to strike a balance between a free-for-all approach and an approach that is too restrictive, that only the very good ones or the rich ones, even worse, etc., can access university. At least the faculty that they want. Because at least in the case of Italy, whether it is right or wrong, this what we call closed number, so where you must sit for an admission exam after you have graduated from high school, is only for certain faculties and not for all the faculties. Then definitely, yes, students, let's say, in need, whether because of a disability or because of economic conditions, etc., deserve targeted measures. And what would be wrong is to have measures that are equal, let's say, and not equitable. Let me give you a practical example. In some countries, including my own countries, during the COVID-19, to support, for instance, economy, enterprises, etc., they said, okay, let's reduce the price of the fuel, for instance. We cut down the taxes on the fuel, so everybody will pay less. Now, I am the owner. I am not the owner of a Ferrari, of course. I am the owner of a Ferrari. I am going to benefit, so I don't need any support because I'm a very rich person. I'm going to benefit much, much more than the poor worker who maybe doesn't own any car because he can't even afford the car, who has a very small Fiat 500, second hand, third hand, very old, and that guy is going to save very, very little, while the owner of the Ferrari is going to save a lot of money. So these measures should be targeted to the students who really need them, and they should not be horizontal measures who are going to benefit everybody, even the ones who don't need it. Of course, in an ideal world, we would all be rich, all be wealthy. This is a sort of aspirational goal, but the reality is that nowadays, at least, there are some people who don't need support, some people who need support. And I think it should be the responsibility of the government, of the state, to target these people and help them not to be left behind. Let me stop now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. De Bernardi. And now we are going to shift the discussion round into the third and maybe the most interesting topic, which will be led by Deborah. Deborah, please take the lead.
Thank you, Enes. Hi, everyone. I'm Deborah. First of all, I'd like to thank you all for your opinions until now. It's really nice to hear your thoughts on what you think it should be done for the education system to be more inclusive and equitable. Now I want to shift the discussion into another subtopic. We all know that teaching and education itself has evolved over centuries and is always evolving by adopting new approaches, new methods, and new technologies. Especially now, in this current situation, we were faced with the fact of how important it is for students at an early age to develop a set of skills. For example, informed decision-making or creative problem-solving, but above all, adaptability. These skills allow young people to use the opportunities offered by technologies. In my opinion, children and adolescents can only fully exercise their right to learn if they have access to quality materials. And from the current situation, we witness that accessing these materials can be hard. I mean, we all right now are using the Zoom platform and we are very lucky, but there are children, adolescents who don't even have access to internet. So you were asked in your application form to choose two methods or ways on how can we implement new technological approaches in order for the educational to be more qualitative. The most chosen answers were by improving connectivity for schools that need it most, for example, infrastructure, by effectively financing digital curriculum and materials, for example, digital libraries, and by targeting problems to include the most vulnerable children with equipment and connectivity. Actually, surprisingly for me, even though I agree with all of these answers, surprisingly for me, not a lot of you had chosen increasing cooperation with government and with international partners. So inevitably, my question to you is, who do you believe has to take action to manage these trends? And what should the role of governance be? And also, the role of businesses and international partners? And most importantly, can actually students benefit from technology at home? And what does this mean for the future of learning? I want you to all express your opinions freely and most importantly, give your own experiences on what obstacles did you face during this time, because I'm pretty sure we all at some point studied online. So I see, let me check. I see that Fiona has a point. So Fiona, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Deborah. What I like to say is that we need an urgent kit of aid, I would like to call it, because the situation is urgent and requires measurements. We do need actually a response that covers all children. It will not be possible, but it is worth a try. Now, what I would like to add is that we usually we see ourselves, young people, children, we see ourselves as recipients of politics of education, when in fact we do have the potential to be more than that. We do have the potential to be contributors to the system. Now, what I would like to say is that we can think of a response that can touch a lot of children, and that is creating a database. For the moment, we do have databases from schools that require information, for example, like what do your parents work with, or So we might as well create a database for technologies that children own. It is crucial for the moment that we do make possible for children to have access to technologies, because we do know that the pandemic will have a lasting effect, and we are not clear still for the situation, how it's going to be next year. For one thing we know for sure, that a lot of things are going to be held online. So in this moment, especially in Albania, we do know from the current situation that a lot of children do not have access to technologies, and so do not have access to education. And we really do need to make a cooperation with government and also the foreign NGOs in order to create maybe a fund or maybe an urgent response in order to help children during this situation.
Thank you, Fiona. Now I see Leonardo. Leonardo, the floor is yours.
Thank you. So actually, the first and foremost thing that I do fundamentally believe that we should do to make the technology more accessible to the students is basically changing the curriculum to make it more friendly and more easy access, and the technology to have a more easy way to go into the curriculum. So first of all, we need to make changes. The governments needs to make changes. The ministers needs to make changes so that there is space inside a 45-minute class to use and implement those certain points of technology. And when we say technology, I do not only mean the digital technology. I'm also talking about even some of the most basic equipment, such as laboratory equipments, or whatever is needed in chemistry, biology, etc., etc. My class in my school, there are what is called pilot classes. There's only 2 of these in my school, and it's a class that has a digital board. It has projectors, and even has iPads, and all these very, very awesome things that would very much improve our whole learning experience are only let down because there is a sort of miscommunication with the agency that is providing the internet, the Wi-Fi to the school, which basically means we cannot use absolutely none of all of those things that we have. So there are a lot of good things, there are a lot of improvements of technology in these schools that are lost in bureaucracies and ways that people are trying to profit for themselves. So honestly, I do believe that the government needs to take a better look at this, make a better look at all the ways that they make sure that those private companies are able to support and also put these technologies into our schools. Because I do not only believe that the government, it's not the government's duty to only put iPads and only put our classes and make it all high tech and whatever. It's the government's job to find those private companies that can also supply with us, make those assignments, make those contracts, so that we can have a better experience learning and whatever. And even those classes like mine, for instance, that we do have all these benefits, is the government's job to make sure that the bureaucracies are less and it's more easy to learn this way. Thank you.
Thank you, Leonardo. I see Arlindi next. So Arlindi, you may go on.
Thank you for the speech. So I really agree with what Leonardo mentioned before, with all its statement and also intervention. I just want to add something, as I'm a high school student and I don't know really much regarding the university curricula and also university diploma evaluation, but I can talk in a position of a student that love programming, and I'm part of a program called Code for Albania, which is a really good initiative, in fact, for Albania as a small country, in order to help students starting from high school till the university, in order to gain really good programming skills in order to then face the labor market. We all see that the trends of choosing a topic for university is basing more in computer and programming and also software engineering. And that's not strange, because, and not to be like excited or we have to be sure that the technology is going to so the technology is going to affect all the labors, especially labors regarding that are digitalized nowadays. And one of these is going to be biotechnology. What I'm meaning by technology, because we are all seeing that the world is suffering from viruses and from other issues that are threatening our life and citizens' life. And in Albania, we don't have a specific subject regarding biotechnology university, either in a private university or in a public university. And what I want to mean with this is that we have to create and we have to call government, international actors, and also NGOs in order to better analyze and create a strategy in order to create a sustainable program for school curricula and university curricula. The Albanian Digital Agenda for 2030 points the integration of use of ICT in contemporary teaching and learning, where all actors, starting from teacher, parents, students, policymakers, and service providers, play specific roles in the creation of educational spaces. But in Albania, school institution, ICT is used at a low, moderate, extended teaching and learning, and various factors affect this. And so I think is needed in Albania to support teaching blended learning, offline and online, which can increase the quality of education in Albania, but not only. Thank you.
Thank you, Arlind. I think we can make one more point. So, Gavio.
So we at the Portalis Studentor, I made a survey, and we sent the survey in the period when high schoolers transition to online learning. So we sent a survey to the students of Sami Frashëri High School in Tirana. We also have responses from other high schools, but this one got the most responses. And in a scale of 1 to 10, 33.3%, so 1/3, claimed that online learning deserved a 1 out of 10 points. And the reasons for this, according to the students, are that online learning is not the same as learning in class because it lacks interactivity. One other reason is when I follow online learning, sometimes I lose attention. And the other reason, like the 3 most top reasons, are the concepts and the lessons are not explained the way they should. Then if they, if we ask them about how the quality of the education is that they are getting online from their school, 47 of them say that it's not efficient, while only 16% of them say it is efficient. So what I'm trying to say with this is that if we want to transition into online learning, make it possible for the students that it can be more efficient and that online learning can be more, can be better for them. Also, one really important topic and point I want to make is the fact that if they want online learning to be, because the Minister of Education said that during this upcoming academic year, they are going to integrate online learning with in-class learning in high schools. If they want to do that, it would be good and important if they would make this inclusive, so that even the students that do not have the financial means to follow online learning can follow it. I don't know how they would be able to do this. Actually, I know how they can do this, but it costs millions of euros. So I'm not going to say it, but I think that they should find an alternative to that. So that they can make everything more inclusive for all and that no one is left behind, as Mr. Bernardi said. Thank you.
Thank you, Gavia, for your comments. Now I believe I'd like to give the floor back to Mr. De Bernardi so he can give his comments on the points that were made until now. Dr. De Bernardi, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Well, once again, I have to repeat myself, a lot of food for thought and very thought-provoking intervention and comments, etc. Let me try to address some of them. Well, first of all, perhaps the issue of the money, the issue of the budget, since our colleague said that he has a solution, but perhaps it's too expensive, the solution. Now, well, unfortunately, we should not forget that in spite of a sort of upward trend, at least over the last few years, the budgetary allocation for education in Albania is still quite low. Is around 3% or slightly more, while, for instance, the average of the European Union countries and also the Western Balkans basically is around 5%. And then let's not forget that, but this applies to any other country anyway, not only Albania, most of this allocation is somehow exhausted, I would say, by the recurrent costs. Most of the recurrent costs are teacher salary, of course, because the number of teachers is large everywhere in the world. So the possibility of using funds for capital investment, let's call them this way, is relatively limited, because not only the funds are limited also in absolute terms, but also the funds available for capital investment costs would be relatively limited. So this is something that we have to take into consideration, and we are insisting a lot, not only as UNICEF, but also as UN and as bilaterals with the government sort of decision makers to try and make sure that the allocation to the Ministry of Education increases considerably, because this would be a good investment for the whole country, not just for the education sector. Of course, it goes without saying. Then regarding digital learning, well, there are, I would say, 4 components that have to be present Well, one is access connectivity, of course, although not in all the cases, and I will explain better later on. The other one are devices, but again, also this in not all the cases. The other one is content, and that, yes, has to be present for everybody all the time. And the other one is skills, skills for both the students as well as for the teachers, because as the survey that was, whose results were communicated to us by our colleague, well, it's not the same. The way is not the same. Talking to you, looking at you with these small windows on one computer screen, it's also not the same to follow a lesson in front of a computer screen with all the faces, or maybe the teacher. The interaction, well, is not completely absent, but it is not the same. I agree with you. I mean, so far, at least, we have not yet been able anywhere in the world to replace completely the sort of traditional way of teaching, traditional way of learning with this new normal, with this sort of digital learning method, etc. And I don't think the objective should be that, because there are a lot of aspects, particularly for young children. Let's not forget the very young children. There are a lot of aspects that cannot be replaced by technology. So the challenge, let's say, would be to achieve what we also call blended learning, a blend between the traditional, let's call it this way, and the digital learning. Now, when I said that access and devices are not absolutely necessary all the time, what did I mean? I mean that digital learning is not making sure that every single student has an iPad and has access all the time. Because digital learning may also be the student living in rural areas, goes to school whenever he or she needs to go to school. In that school, it may be a multi-graded classrooms. However, there are recorded lessons that can be seen online on a device that the school has, lessons given by the best teacher in Albania, who has recorded a lesson and is going to explain to all those kids in, I don't know, rural Malacaster, as well as in rural Tropoia, or in rural Permet, and everywhere in Albania, I don't know how to understand quadratic equations that I have never understood myself, but I am sure that had I been able to follow a lecture by the best Italian math teacher, perhaps I would have been able to understand the quadratic equation. I was a lousy student, first of all, at least in math, and I had a lousy teacher, and I have never been able to understand the quadratic equations. Perhaps nowadays I would still be a lousy student, but thanks to the technology, and not because I have an iPad and I have 24 hours a day, 7 days a week access to internet, maybe I would have been able to understand quadratic equations, thanks exactly to technology and to the possibility of being exposed to the lecture given by the top Albanian or Italian, in my case, teacher or math professor. Then the collaboration with the private sector. Now, I have, relatively good or relatively limited, I don't know, but I have some experience in collaboration with the private sector in my previous country where I was stationed before coming to Albania, in Colombia, where UNICEF had a program of local fundraising, meaning trying to get money from, let's say, the Colombians who wanted to donate to support the UNICEF programs, including education programs, of course, and also the private sector. Now, my experience is that maybe with some very few exceptions, the few exceptions may be Bill Gates, Warren Buffett, and few others. Seldom the private sector does something just for the sake of humanity or for the poor children or for the poor students. The private sector is a partner. I don't want to criminalize the private sector, but they are also looking for some advantages, for some profit. Of course, the advantage could just be maybe visibility. You can give a lot of visibility to the private sector. I mean, there are some private sector company who spends billions of dollars every year in publicity, the sort of word of mouth publicity is something quite effective, particularly for some sectors is very, very effective. So sometimes they may be satisfied with great visibility, great publicity, etc., etc. Other times, well, we may need to find a way of combining, let's say a win-win. We need a win-win situation, a situation where we can benefit from the funds or the services of the private sector, and the private sector can also get something in terms of visibility, return of their investment, etc., etc. But yes, I fully agree with you that particularly as far as digital learning is concerned, collaboration with the private sector is an area that we have to explore and to exploit, I would say. Then, yeah, I think let me stop here also because in the interest of time, I think we are getting closer and closer to the end, but once again, many thanks. And sorry, one more thing before giving the floor to the moderator, of course. I think the moderator has my email address. The ones of you should feel free to share it with all the participants. The ones of you who would like to write to me, not that I'm going to solve your problems or the problems of the world or the problems of Albania, but if you are looking for some more information or whatever, I don't know, if you want to exchange views, etc., please don't feel shy. I see that you are not shy at all, and you are more than welcome to write and to engage in this lively discussion. Continue to engage in this lively discussion. Thank you.
Okay. Deborah, shall I continue?
Yes, I think we may have time for 2 more comments, maybe, from Henry and Anya, because I saw that they had commented on the chat. So, Henry?
I wanted to make just a short statement. When it comes to practical learning, we have to be able to keep the practical learning intact while we include artificial intelligence into our educational system. But this is something that Mr. Bernardi mentioned. So basically, I wanted to elaborate more on that, but we already got the answers. So basically that was it. And the last thing that I would like to say in this case is that we have to look at artificial intelligence as a way to build resilience for the educational systems to be more resilient, because we have witnessed that it was because of artificial intelligence that we could, at least at some level, keep the educational system intact, because we witnessed that it was the most vulnerable when it came to shutting down at immediate effect. So it was artificial intelligence that helped us at least keep some level of education. But of course, there's much work that needs to be done. And this is basically what I wanted to say. So thank you.
Anya, you may have the floor.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so about like digital education, about I agree with what Mr. Bernardi and everyone else said, but I also wanted to say that I've come from a school that has used like digital interaction in some kind of way, not in every subject, but in some subjects. I've come from Same Frasher, which is a public high school, but it's also one of the best public high schools considered. Again, I would like to say that what I've seen, what I've personally experienced as someone who has experienced this digital education is that, okay, it is helpful, but we should not just take it like we need digital education, but also about interactivity. Because if a teacher, just explains using like a computer or like a PowerPoint presentation, but again, does not, include other students and does not make them feel welcome, I think this is another important issue that we have to take, because digital tools should be used just like that, as tools that enhance education, but we also should focus on what presently happens in the classroom. Like, are the children, the youth comfortable? Are like they feeling like safe spaces? Like, our cell phones are forbidden in classrooms because they are too distracting. But this is like a wrong consultation, because like cell phones are not distracting if your if what you teach is like interactive. So rather than forbidding something and telling students that we should not do these things, I think we should encourage like to use these things, but about about helpful stuff, like looking up at an information, checking up something else. So rather than like forbidding, rather than just using digital tools as something to improve the presentation or the teaching methods of teachers, I think we should also take in considerations the way they're used to increase participation and interactivity in classrooms. Thank you.
Thank you, Anya. Stevie, you can take it from here.
Okay. Well, good things do not last, huh? I believe there's been a wonderful discussion with all of you, filled with very, very interesting ideas and opinions. We began with a very insightful discussion on the learning challenges in Albania and the world. Then we heard some very interesting opinions when it came to achieving an inclusive and equitable quality education. And last but not least, we finished with a very engaging discussion on new approaches to education required by digital technologies. And I want to give a massive, massive thanks to each and every one of you for all your interesting remarks. And now I have a question for Roberto. Dr. De Bernardi, is there any one thing that you would like the audience to take away from this session? What would it be? And if there are any closing remarks from your side, it would be welcome. Thank you. The floor is yours.
I was muted. I think that what I said before is actually a quote from a musician called B.B. King. He was a bluesman. I mean, I'm not particularly fond of blues. I'm more on the rock. But the thing that B.B. King said about education, it is something that is going to be with you forever, that no one can take away from you. It is really true. I think that is really the best investment that we can make. I'm saying this mainly as a father now, because of these two kids. One is actually studying here in Albania, well, in a private school, because he speaks Albanian the way I speak it, very, very little. By the way, about the best high schools, what I have heard would be either Petronini Luarasi or Kosova School, the best public high schools in Tirana, at least. Am I correct or not?
I think you are. Also, including Sami Frasheri, they are the
Sami
best
Frasheri also. Okay, good. No, I mentioned particularly PNL, the way I think it is called, Petronini Luarasi, because some of my son's friends and sort of teammates of the basketball team, because he used to play, now with the lockdown, he can't play anymore, in the Albanian Youth League. They are from that school. That's why I was mentioning that. And apparently they say that is the top, is the best, etc., etc. No, going back to what I was saying before, yes, to me the takeaway message would really be that it's the best possible investment that one can make for himself or for herself. And it is something that no one can take away from you. And even things that you may think, well, they are not so important, so practical, so relevant to learn, sooner or later, I am sure that they will become very important and very relevant for your professional life. And as I said before, once again, let's not forget that the goals of education to me are two: not only to help you find a good job and become a relatively wealthy person, a person who can earn well his or her own life, but to make you a better person. Thank you.
Stevie, you
have to unmute yourself, I believe. This time it's your turn.
I'm so sorry. Okay, I would like to give a really heartfelt thanks to you, Doctor. Thank you for all your interesting remarks. And before we go, I was saying that I invite all of you to show it your UN75 placards, which you were kindly asked to bring with you, so we can have a nice photo together. Okay. Please give a sign when the photo is taken, somebody. Okay, great. Thank you so very much once again for participating in this event, and we hope that you enjoyed it, and we wish you a wonderful week.
Thank you all. Thank you for inviting me and for
Have a
such
lovely
a
rest
lovely
of the day.
discussion. Thank you. It was a pleasure.
The pleasure was ours.